Welcome back. Electric vehicles, commonly known as EVs, are often considered one of many solutions to combat climate change. However, if you don't have an EV, you may not be aware of the challenges that come with owning one. Deputy Editor for Special Projects at Consumer Reports, Brian Vines, created an article highlighting these challenges, and he joins us now to discuss. Brian, thank you so much for joining me.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Kibin.
Now, just to add some background to the entire situation, can you briefly explain how EVs were introduced as a tool to combat climate change or global warming?
Electric vehicles are something that the president are currently getting very much behind as an idea for bringing down some of the ill effects of gas-powered vehicle emissions. We see the smog across the country from buses and trucks and cars, many of them commuter vehicles. So there's really a lot of science that backs this idea that by reducing some of those emissions, especially from passenger cars, those old cars with the gas combustion engine emitting a bunch of fumes, if we bring EVs to the market, that it will cut down on a lot of that pollution and quell some of the ill effects that we've been experiencing from climate change prompted by some of those emissions. As a matter of fact, the president aims to have half of the vehicles sold and on the roads by 2030 to be electric vehicles because they believe so firmly in their ability to sort of stop some of these ill effects of climate change.
And I'm sure that's maybe, one of many reasons why some may prefer to use an EV over a standard car. But what goes into owning an EV, and how does it differ from the regular cars that we see on our street today?
Well, one of the first concerns that people may have when they're looking at EVs, and one of the starkest differences, is right in your pocketbook. An electric vehicle last year around February, the average price was just over $58,000 to buy an electric car. That's about $13,000 more expensive than the average gas powered car. Now, there have been a few incentives that folks can apply for when getting an EV that can reduce that bill by a few $1,000s. I believe that number is hovering around $7,000 in rebates that the government is offering for folks who are buying EVs. But it's still a bit of sticker shock when you see that you're going to be making an investment in that electric vehicle versus what you would be paying for a traditional gas powered. So, number one, looking at that. And number two, what actually prohibits most people in our Consumer Reports nationally representative survey said the lack of charging infrastructure is their number one reason for delaying or all out not buying an electric vehicle because they're afraid they won't be able to charge it once they get it.
Now, I understand that you also have an article where you kind of fully explore, just some of those challenges. Can you talk a little bit about what sparked your interest and kind of like looking into that?
Well, we all want to do our part, right? And it is just a small part in a larger collective. And we fully recognize that huge corporations who are doing things in the environment and emitting lots of gas have a largely disparate impact over what we as individuals can do. But you still want to feel like you're doing something, right? I bundle Amazon packages when they're coming so I don't get one thing a day. I say, hold on to it, deliver them all at once, save the traffic, save the strain on the environment, carrying my own bag to the grocery store, riding a bike, taking public transit, all these little things that we do. But making the switch to an EV can make a larger impact. So that really is something that folks are considering doing to feel like they're doing their part.
Now, I really want to explore the challenge of charging the car because I think that's maybe one of the biggest challenges that most people have, especially if they live in a major city like New York City. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we are largely apartment dwellers. And even those of us who own homes sometimes don't have, number one, a parking space that's dedicated to us or access to a driveway, and God forbid a garage if you have a garage. So a lot of us find ourselves searching for parking all night long if you do have a car and, again, don't have a garage or a place to keep your car. So charging is a challenge. And that's something we as New Yorkers face more than a lot of folks across the country who have a parking setup or a way to do it. So in New York, even if you have a house, a lot of times our houses may be row houses or you don't have a dedicated parking spot. So it's hard to install those chargers that many folks who are in the suburbs or other places outside of New York do have access to. So that number one challenge is being able to number one, park your vehicle near your home, and number two, be able to charge it while it is parked. But the city has engaged in a 4-year pilot program that's delivering public electronic charging stations right to the city. As a matter of fact, as we sit here right now, there are about 82 public charging stations in the Bronx, and 35 of them actually offer free charging.
Oh, that's amazing. So there is hope out there, is what you're saying.
There's a silver lining, and things are only going to get better because the US government under the Biden administration seems to be all in making EVs a thing. There's about $7.5 billion committed as part of the Infrastructure Investment Act that's going to bring greater, faster charging network of something like 500,000 public level 2 and level 3 chargers to be installed along highways. But what often gets missed is a lot of those chargers are actually earmarked within communities as well. So while most of the media is focusing on, corridors along highways and major byways, they're actually going to be charging stations that are part of that 500,000 new chargers that are coming to communities just like the Bronx.
Now, I think this is amazing that there is something coming, but in the meantime, New Yorkers have been finding more creative solutions to, combat this issue of, charging the car. And we saw in a few pictures that, we see wires going through, the front yard. Can you tell us a little bit more about, that experience and how it could actually be a little bit costly?
Well, those little charging setups, people are getting very creative. We've all seen those wires hanging from the top floor, coming from the basement, out of apartment windows. So there's a lot of that going on. And number one, the thing is safety first. So when you are engaging in getting a charger installed, make sure that you're going to a licensed electrician and someone who is actually qualified to do the work, because there are a lot of folks. Myself personally, I was on Angie's List, and people were just sending me all kinds of proposals, and digging a little bit deeper, a lot of them weren't even licensed electricians. They were just like, oh, I can do this. If you go to an electrician, you're going to pay twice as much. But do your due diligence if you are interested in installing a charger in your home, because that little money you save in the beginning is not going to amount to much if you're blowing out the electric in your building or causing fires or even just burning out your car. So it's worth the investment to invest in people who are actually licensed and know what they're doing and who work within the parameters of the laws of the city of New York. Because some of these charging schemes are dangerous and illegal. So stay within the bounds of the law, and public safety as well as your personal safety is really important.
Now, when it comes to adopting more environmentally friendly options, accessibility and affordability remain a huge concern, often deterring people from making this switch. How does this exacerbate the problem? Or is this something that possibly, if you have more income that you can overlook? I think for many people, being able to afford it is a main concern. So, can you give us a little bit more details about that?
As folks adopt electric vehicles more and more, the prices will come down as the government continues to invest in the infrastructure to power these vehicles and make sure that charging is something that folks have access to regardless of the socioeconomic status of their neighborhoods. We believe that the price will come down and become more accessible for a wider range of folks. And one of the things that a lot of people who work in the industry are saying is these electronic vehicles may actually lessen the need for individuals to have cars, because technology is moving at such a fast clip that we're fixing the charging problem while technology is already down the road thinking about driverless cars and what it means to have vehicles in communities that are piloting themselves, that don't need to be privately owned, and can have rates for driving you around that are equal or less than if you had your own private vehicle. So some of the folks I talked to said, we're solving problems we're making solutions for problems that aren't going to be problems in a few years because we're working so far ahead. So between the technology as well as the investment in infrastructure, we may be in a greater position, a better position than it might look right now.
Now, as mentioned, owning an EV is an investment, but for those who may not be ready to make the switch or may not have, the resources to make the switch, what can New Yorkers do to make changes to their daily lives that will still, kind of result in just being a little bit more environmentally conscious?
By and large, New Yorkers are already ahead of the curve at the curb. They're already ahead of the curve over a lot of folks across the country. We take public transportation. The lifeblood of the city is that train, and most of us are on trains and buses, and that is a huge part of why this city is environmentally sound. It's also one of the reasons why electronic vehicles makes so much sense for cities because our commutes are generally shorter and the charges last longer, and we don't need to drive as far as folks who do live in the suburbs and drive to the grocery store. They drive to work, they drive to the mall, they drive all of these places where we by and large walk. So continue to rate you are and use public transportation. We keep things local, shopping local, doing all sorts of things just with the consciousness of being less of an impact on the environment, whether it is, like I said, having your packages bundled when you're getting an Amazon delivery, or taking bags to the grocery store, taking advantage of the curbside recycling, and now the composting that we also have in the city. So there are a lot of products and plans in play that we just need to take full advantage of.
And what do you hope to see for the future of EVs in cities like New York City?
What I hope is for more holistic plans for transportation, and EVs may be a part of that, but we have to continue to build and maintain a robust public transportation as well as public charging network because it's all part of one package. We don't all need cars, but we all need to get where we're going. And if we can do that in a safe, affordable, equitable way for all New Yorkers, that's really the path forward.
Well, Brian, I want to thank you so much for joining us and educating me and our community about EVs and just ways we could be a little bit more environmentally conscious.
Thanks, Kibin. Be careful out there.
If you would like to learn more about this report, you can find the full story on their website at www.cr.org. Stay tuned, we have more open for you right after this.